So earlier today, we brought Mick from London to Manchester on the train. I put him in first class like a gentleman, and we didn't, like regular, and then he comes through after he got his food. But he came through and joined us to chat, and there was something he told me. I was like, in my head, I'm going, you have to tell us tonight. So who here saw Beyond the Mat? So when Barry Blaustein said, I want to profile Mick Foley, he's really interested. Who did Vince McMahon think that he should profile?
That's why we covered this on The Conversation. Barry Blaustein, originally, I got a knock on my door where I was staying in Las Vegas. I think it was at the Copper Nugget. It wasn't even the Silver Nugget or the Golden Nugget. It was a different metal alloy below silver and gold, where that night I would wrestle Sabu in a Falls Count Anywhere match, highlighted by me pile-driving Sabu on the card table, the blackjack table, but before I did it, not realizing that you can literally be killed legally, I did a clean sweep of the blackjack table, took my hand, and swept thousands of dollars of chips off the blackjack table, at which point armed guards approached the table and then watched as I pile drove Sabu on top of it, because that's just the way we rolled. I was determined to give every person there the most bang I possibly could for the buck, and believe me, Sabu was right there every moment of it. But the knock on the door, and it was Barry Bloom, who I only knew as the agent for Jesse the Body Ventura. Jesse was the first guy in our business to have a professional sports agent, and he had a guy named Barry Blaustein with him. And at that point, Barry told me about the movie he had in mind, Beyond the Mat, and the role that he was envisioning me for was as the guy who'd had a taste of national stardom, and I was back on the independent scene. Because that, a lot of people thought I'd peaked. It wasn't like WCW was demanding me back. There was no interest in WWE. I was a guy who traveled Japan once a month for 8 to 10 days and came back in pretty serious condition a lot of that time. I worked my butt off, for ECW and any promotion, trying to steal the show every single night I could. And Barry wanted me to be that guy, living that life, having had that taste of stardom, and now back out there, doing incredibly dangerous stuff to put a roof over my kids' heads. And then, unfortunately, fate intervened, and he at that time had worked out a deal with Mr. McMahon because we were trailing WCW. And it turned out Mr. McMahon didn't care for the movie, didn't care for the direction it went. I always stood by the movie, which caused me some, difficulties with Mr. McMahon. But Barry told me after the fact that when he went to Mr. McMahon and said he wanted to follow me, that Vince was surprised, like, why him? And Barry said, because that guy has a real-life story far more interesting than the fictional one you're trying to portray. And Barry said, who should I follow? Ahmed Johnson.
Can you imagine?
It was Ahmed Johnson and Mark Marrow. And Mark Marrow is a fantastic human being. He really is. He does an unbelievable job speaking to kids, and he shares his story. He's one of the greatest ex-wrestlers of all time. Ex-wrestlers. But those are the two guys that Mr. McMahon thought would be the cornerstone. This is back in the day when I went to Hyannis, Massachusetts, where I'd wrestle underneath a tent in front of a couple thousand people. And Jimmy Miranda, he came to me. They had I'm trying to think of what you'd call it. He had like a checkbook of all these things, like a graph of all the merchandise that they were expecting certain guys to have. And they were like, Barry Windham as the stalker. Every single piece of merchandise was checked. Mark Henry, every piece of merchandise. Mark's a Hall of Famer. Barry was a fantastic wrestler. Mankind, T-shirt, check. And that was it. They had in mind for me one item of merchandise, and it was a T-shirt. And Stone Cold comes over and goes, hey, Miranda, how about a T-shirt for Stone Cold? And Jimmy goes, what the hell is wrong, Miranda? He goes, I'm sorry, Steve. The office doesn't see any potential for Steve Austin merchandise. So the one thing, there's several things you could say, kind words about Mr. McMahon. He will roll with the punches, and he will go with the hot hand. And unlike WCW, where it was frustrating, as he felt like a bunch of people playing with someone else's money, like this was his money. You didn't have to be his friend or his pal to get a push if he thought he could draw it. It could be someone that he swore he'd never do business with. He'll bring you back if he thinks it's good for business.
I do love that the full checklist was there for the stalker Barry Windham, who was a babyface in camouflage, that in his theme music was the sound of women screaming.